Salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. This is Gemini Brett. I'm going to show you a little something about love lines on astro maps. I'm just about to teach a 5-week deep dive into local space astrology, which is an incredible relocational technique, astro mapping technique, very different than like relocational charts or astrocartography, which is the astro mapping technique I think most are familiar with. But I'm actually going to start with astrocartography and then bring this over to local space as I share a personal experience of astro love lines. So to the charts, this is my nativity, October 24th, 1975. Venus's day, Friday, 7:39 p.m. in Boston, Massachusetts, with 9.5 degrees Gemini on the rise. And we can also see this chart like this on Earth, although these local space lines that are emanate from Boston, the place of my birth. But before we go there, well, you know what? Let's go there. I'm going to take away the local space lines and we'll focus first on astrocartography lines. So basically, these lines show us where planets in this moment, in this case of my nativity, this is my natal chart shown on Earth. These are the lines that show us where planets were either rising at the ascendant or reaching their highest height, culminating at the meridian midheaven, or resting into the western horizon, the descendant, or rooting down below the ground at the Imam Cheli, the bottom of the heavens, the IC. So basically, astrocartography lines show us where planets were angular. There's a couple of ways we can look at this. One is zodiacal, which is basically in reference to where these planets project to. Okay, so let me share something about this. This is a very different way to see my chart with our feet on the ground. This is planetarium software, stellarium astronomy software, which is just brilliant. And this is my ascendant over here, where the ecliptic, the plane of our solar system, or at least the plane of the Earth-Sun relationship, intersects the eastern horizon. The midheaven, where that ecliptic intersects the local meridian above ground. The descendant, where the ecliptic intersects the western horizon. And down below the ground, I'm going to turn around in the northern hemisphere. I have to look north and below the ground to find the IC, which is where the ecliptic intersects the meridian below ground. Yeah, so that's somewhere between Venus and Saturn in my own nativity. Let's look back towards the south. Actually, let's look east real quick. And I'm going to show you down below the ground at the time of my birth. Here's the moon in the sign of Gemini, and she was in her disseminating or waning gibbous phase, and it's cool how stellarium shows that. This is the moon's orbital path. So where the moon's path, here and shown in silver, crosses the sun's path, or the ecliptic, here shown in gold, that's a lunar node. This is the south lunar node at the time of my birth. Which is in the 12th house, east, above the eastern horizon. But what I want to show you very importantly is that the moon's course is not the same as the sun's course, right? So all the planets have their own paths. And the moon at the time of my birth had what's called a celestial latitude, okay, of about 3 degrees south. So that's about 3 degrees distance. So we just say the moon lives here. That's 2501 tropical Gemini. But we often lose this dimensionality in astrology because what we do is we bring all of the planets, even though they all have their own orbital paths, right? We bring all of the planets to the ecliptic plane. And when we do, we're basically doing zodiacal projections of the planets. And so one way we can look at astrocartography lines is according to zodiacal projection. And then these lines, like for example, this would be Chiron. Well, let's see, which one will I do? Let's do the moon. The moon culminating when I was born. This is the moon at the midheaven line. So the moon at the 9th house, 10th house cusp in Turkmenistan, in Iran, here in Oman. That's zodiacal. But if I look in Mundo, you'll see that it shifts a little bit. You can see this maybe more with this Venus line or Pluto line over here, right? Especially with the Pluto line. And in Mundo, I was actually considering the planet's latitude. So when I was born in the 70s, Pluto was very far from the ecliptic plane. And so Pluto was actually rising. This is the Pluto rising line in a different place than the degree that Pluto projects to. And that's the difference between in Mundo and zodiacal. And Jim Lewis, who in so many ways brought this idea of astrocartography to the modern mind through the advancements in computer technology, really, greatly preferred in Mundo. Most astrocartographers like to consider planetary latitude and where a planet was actually rising or actually culminating. Um, some prefer zodiacal. I like to go with both. All right, so I want to bring us to this line, which is where the south node of the moon was culminating in the moment of my birth. But first, we're going to go actually on the exact opposite side of the world, right? So if I just continue this line around the globe this way, it's going to bring me to where the north node was culminating, and that's in Hawaii. All right, so let me zoom in over on Hawaii because I want to share this story. I'll share this picture that came up in my Facebook memories today. This is called a glory. Um, Not a great resolution of this because I couldn't find it in my files. I just grabbed it from Facebook. Um, but what you can see here is the shadow of a plane that I was riding in, and it's surrounded by a circle rainbow. So this is a pretty cool happening. It requires a certain level of moisture and certainly requires a very specific angle of the sun such that it's projecting the shadow of the plane, in this case, down onto this cloud, and at a very specific angle that allows the refraction of light, just like we can only see rainbows when the sun's at a certain angle. And you get this experience. It was the first time I had seen this, which is a glory of a plane. I had seen one in the sky in a different way. It's a story for another time, and actually from Maui sometime, some years before this, from Haleakala, from the House of the Sun. And I say actually from Maui because at this time I was actually on this plane riding from Oahu to Maui. And so I was literally moving across this nodal line, right? Because this is Oahu, and I was flying over here to Maui. And I was flying through this line where the north node was culminating in the moment of my birth, and the south node anti-culminating at the IC. So let me show that to you in Stellarium. If I relocate this to Oahu, let's go to Honolulu. And if I elect to see this moon, who is way below ground here, Stellarium will let me show her orbital path. And you see that crossing point of the moon's silver circle and the sun's golden circle here, which in the time of my birth is in the sign of the Scorpion, the sign of Scorpio and the constellation of the Scales. And in Oahu at this time, it was culminating, the north node culminating. Okay. So one of the reasons why I love astrolocality and astromapping techniques so much is they're really rooted in physical experience, embodied, astronomical astrology, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the name of the game. And so this is a really wonderful technique that speaks about, power places on Earth, right? So this is where Neptune was culminating when I was born. And I guess that's happening in, I think this is Tahiti, not labeled here in Astro Gold software, but I'm pretty sure that's Tahiti. So I could go there, let's find out actually. Let's go in Stellarium, and check out Tahiti. Wait, can I not spell? Do I have to go to French Polynesia? Okay, Fa'a'a as in Tahiti, right? Yeah, so Neptune. Well, not right there. Although actually, it's Fa'a's maybe in Samoa. And anyway, I'm just now expressing my geographic ignorance. So why don't I go back to Boston, which is a place I'm more familiar with, to the place of my birth. And I'll play with Tahiti and Samoa on my own time. Anyway, okay, so this is where I was born, and here's my birth chart. And Neptune was right at the descendant when I was born. So, Neptune in the seventh house of relationship might be a place I want to go for relational happenings. Um, and many would say look to the Venus line. So I can see, for example, where Venus was setting when I was born, and that's this line here. So where Neptune was culminating and Venus was setting, in fact, that was happening the same moment in this place in the middle of the ocean. Um, but west of that line, so places up here, northern Canada, Venus is going to be right at the seventh house cusp, which is interesting. And I live kind of close to that Venus of the descendant line now in California, in the Bay Area. So I was born over here in Boston, and now I live here in the Bay Area. Closest line to where I live now is this moon at the IC line, and maybe I'll show you that in a relocated chart. So working with astrocartography lines is great because they can just give us so much very kind of quick visual information about relocations, right? So if I move from Boston to California as I have, it's not like the moon is going to leave the sign of Gemini or Venus the sign of Virgo. All the planets will be in the same degrees of the same signs, but they'll live in different houses. And where they become angular, they really come to places of strength. So one thing I can say about Hawaii is, yeah, my north node or the north node of the moon was culminating there in the moment of my birth. So what does that mean? I mean, well, here's what Astro Gold has to say about it. This is a significant location in your life's journey, or you are destined to have associations along this line. This could be in connection with your ancestors, your mother's family, or through people in authority who influence your life. If you travel to this line, then you're likely to discover much about your life purpose and perhaps also about your profession and public status. And we can go on and on and on. And actually, all of those things certainly apply to Hawaii and me. But why I want to share this example right now in this video that I titled Love Lines is this is where I met my love, my partner, Anna Zaharia, who it looks like I put away that picture of the plane glory, but I was flying on this day. It was November 3rd. It was Anna's birthday a couple of years ago, and that's after we had met online. It's the first place we met in body. And we certainly didn't get together at that time, but a seed was planted that sprouted pretty rapidly some months later. So interestingly, the opposite side of the world from Hawaii is Romania. Oops. And this is where Anna's from. So I can see in the moment of my birth that the south node of the moon was culminating above, and therefore the north node at the IC in Romania, and Anna's from over here in Ploiești near Bucharest. And then on the opposite side of the world, the north node is culminating here. So there's some deep soul resonance. I want to bring this into like natal charts. I mean, my north node in the sign of Scorpio is at the midpoint of my partner Anna's sun and Venus. Interestingly, and her sun, which also lives in the sign of Scorpio, is at the midpoint of, my sun and north node, right? So there's connections in that regard. But if I just want to go to like love lines, you're going to read that most about Venus lines and maybe most about Venus setting. Why Venus at the seventh house of Venus, goddess of love, seventh house relationship, right? So you can see this is the honeymooner's line. All personal relationships benefit if you travel to locations along this line. Now there's an astrocartography rule that anyone who plays with maps should know. If you are east of a line, the planet is cadent. So in this case, this would be Venus in the sixth house for my relocations where I live now in the Bay. And if you're west of a line, the planet is angular. So Venus is in the seventh house. I'd have to get way up here. The closest I've been, I guess, is Vancouver and Alaska. I've never actually explored any of these places. But I'm really close to that line where I live now, and where I was living in Seattle, even closer. And I was living there when Anna and I met. So there's a great question of, well, how far from a line do you have to be? Like, so in Seattle, I'm only, 20 miles from the moon line, but 170 miles from the Venus line. Some give about 300 miles. So I can zoom in right now. I live here, Anna and I live together here, and it's only less than 30 miles from my moon line and something like 280 miles from the Venus line. So I'm still living in like this Venus zone if you just say 300 miles from a line. But there's a reason to suggest that being west of an astrocartography line makes the planet stronger, because that's what brings it into the angular house. And really, astrocartography, it's all about angularity. Okay. So Venus line, I mean, that doesn't really have anything to do with Hawaii. And traditionally speaking, it doesn't really have anything to do with relationship for me either, okay? Because traditionally, the system is really based on dispositorship, or, people usually use this term rulership, not my favorite term, but you're going to look for, that potential of love in a native's life in the seventh house and the condition of the seventh house, because that's the house of the other relationship, and not just intimate relationships, but certainly that. We might also look to the condition of the ruler of the fifth place of romance and passion and such. And when I speak traditionally like that, I would probably look to a more traditional house system, the whole sign houses. But regardless, the so-called ruler or dispositor, I like to say the guide of my seventh place of relationship is Jupiter, right? So love lines, if you just read these things on astrocartography maps, like which are very general, they're always going to lean towards Venus, And again, we see Venus here in Astrogo called the honeymooners line, which is something I believe Jim Lewis, how he described Venus, right? And especially Venus at the descendant. Like if we click here, Venus anti-culminating, different rap, because Venus at the IC and Venus at the descendant are very different, right? But if I look for Jupiter lines, right, that might tell me more about natal potentials or promise of relationship, because Jupiter is the guide of my seventh. So if nothing else, you take away from this video, if you're one who plays with astro maps, make sure you're not just looking to Venus for love lines. Look to the planet that's connected to your descendant, right? And I personally prefer traditional associations with planets and signs. All right. And so Jupiter. And so I could go and find Jupiter lines here in my nativity on the astro map. Like there's this Jupiter rising line that moves right through Boulder, Colorado, which is where I went to college and dropped out of college and started a band, and all sorts of other stories come there, and some stories associated with the topic at hand. Here's Jupiter culminating, and there's some stories around that space too, more here. Anyway, but I want to tune you into a whole different perspective, a whole different mapping technique called local space. And Astro Gold, I love it, actually lets me put the local space and the astrocartography lines on the same map. I will be teaching in this class coming up how these relate, and the key is these circles. Like this is where Jupiter was directly overhead when I was born, just here off the coast of Western Africa. I'm going to actually take the astrocartography lines away for a second. Maybe I'll bring that midheaven line in again. So this midheaven line, this is where Jupiter in the moment of my birth was culminating at the meridian midheaven. As true in Ireland as it is in Africa. But especially, you see that circle right there, and it's where the local space line intersects the meridian line. That's where Jupiter was at the zenith, directly overhead. So, I mean, let's go to that place on Earth. It's near Monrovia. It's maybe a name that needs to change, in Liberia. So let's go in the stellarium in the moment of my birth. I'll head over to Monrovia, and what we'll see is that not only is Jupiter right at the meridian midheaven, above ground, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to lay on my back. I can just hit Shift Z for zenith and stellarium, and we'll see that zenith is directly overhead. This grid will maybe help make that visible. Okay, so this circle, the center of the circle, is the zenith directly above head, right? So that's like Jupiter in the moment of my birth was culminating directly above Liberia, or just here in the water off the coast of Liberia. So it could be a super cool place for me to connect to Jupiterian energies. I mean, what are we going to say about Jupiter? Like, generally speaking, for me, like spirit, this is often seen as a line of opportunity and optimism and expansion, Jupiterian themes. But so much for me, I connect with Jupiter and the Vedic connotations of the planet who's named by, the Indian astrologers guru, that kind of spiritual force, spiritual teaching. Um, but also, Jupiter is the guide in my nativity for 10th sign themes, which is career. I can see 11th house in this porphyry houses of communities, and 7th house of relationship. So one of the old things of Gemini or rising, right? So is where you get for the 7th sign Sag and 10th sign Pisces, traditionally both associated with Jupiter, is that it's often the case that you connect in relationships or partnerships with people from like the workspace and vice versa. And I did meet Anna through my work. All right, so maybe Monrovia, as far as I'm concerned, now she's got her own map, right? But maybe Monrovia would be a place to go for me to connect to that like high honeymoon energy, and also vocational themes with Jupiter's the ruler, not of my midheaven, which is Aquarius, but of the 10th sign, which is Pisces. All right. Great. So what is local space? Let me go back from Monrovia where Jupiter was directly overhead, and I'll go back to my birthplace of Boston, Massachusetts. And here's Jupiter over in the southeast. Jupiter is in the 11th house when I was born. Let me tune in over there. I'm going to kind of zoom into Jupiter. And he's just south of east. If I bring Jupiter down here to the horizon, he's at a, southeast compass heading. I can actually show those in stellarium. He's at what's called an azimuth of about 106 degrees, okay, which is about 16 degrees to the south of cardinal east, right? So that's this line leaving Boston, my birthplace. You can see all these local space lines are emanating from my birthplace, and they'll go all the way around the globe. It's hard to see this on a Mercator projection, but these are great circles. They go all the way around, bisecting the globe, and so they all emanate from the birthplace, and then they converge at the antipode or antipode, the opposite side of the globe, and then they head back around the globe to the birthplace, right? So these literally are like great circles, diameters on the globe. And I love to draw these on Google Earth and show them like three-dimensionally. I think that can be really helpful for our embodiment of this thing like sentiently in the body mind, to understand more about it, bring it out of the intellectual space. That for me is kind of the greatest gift of local space lines, and I'll speak more about that before I close. But notice how like the moon local space line goes to Oman. That's where the moon was directly overhead at the time of my birth. And the Mars line goes over here to Persia, right? Or Saturn line over here, kind of Malaysia zone, right? The Venus line, this is where Venus was directly overhead when I was born. So it's a cool way to know how local space and astrocartography lines relate. So basically, if I time machined back, well, actually, let me just say, if somebody was wise enough in the moment of my birth to hold me up to the only visible planet in the sky, who was Jupiter, they would literally be like holding me up in this south of east direction towards Monrovia, towards Liberia. And that line continues. I mean, I could get even more local with it. I was born at Boston Women's Lying Hospital. Boston, I think that's right. And so I could relocate that there, but I could see this Jupiter line, like very specifically where it's going in local space, like in the city in which I was born. We can go more global with it, see it coming here through Sierra Leone and off the coast of Liberia, where Jupiter was directly overhead, and then down here through Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, towards Lesotho, and there's a Masaru, a sacred mountain here. I've never been. I've connected just a little bit to the energies here through the mystery of the white lions, which my friend Maurice Fernandez turned me on to. He's really connected to the amazing, mysterious, powerful white lions and tradition of South Africa. Look into it. And then coming here, as all these lines will, to the Antipode. This is the opposite side of the globe from Boston, Massachusetts, which is just off the coast of Perth, Australia, which is a place where my Venus local space line moves through. And Jupiter comes up here, closer to Adelaide, through the outback, and then Rockhampton, a place I've never been. I kind of toured around this zone of Australia, but I'd love to go there. And then comes back up. I have to go the other side of the map, right? You can see this Jupiter line coming up here, and then comes through, as we saw before, through Hawaii. Where are we? Here's Jupiter moving just off the coast of Kauai, and then moves here very close to Mount Shasta, and right through the Black Hills of South Dakota, and through Pipestone, Minnesota. Those are the two places that Lakota Chanupa, the pipestone, can come from. And then through the Great Lakes and Toronto, and then back to the birthplace, right? So anyway, I mean, I want to just show this example. Lilith, true black moon Lilith, who's very close to Jupiter in my nativity, actually moves right through Maui. And I'm not going to get into it right now, but there's definitely some connotations of true black moon Lilith with some experiences that I've had in Hawaii, and yeah, let me leave that there. Tale for another time, maybe when we're together underneath the starry sky, okay? But look at that crossing, right? So some call this a biparan, where you have an astrocartography line, in this case the north node culminating, and then a local space line, in this case the Jupiter direction or local space line, like crossing very close to Hawaii, as does the north node Lilith and north node Chiron lines. All right. So, and a cool thing here is, if I relocate, let me show, yeah, let's go to Astro Gold, or sorry, that is Astro Gold. I'm going to go to astro.com local space lines. So let's see. How do I bring you over here? Yeah, Astro.com recently added local space to their free offerings. It's just kind of endless. They've had local space compasses, which I think are amazingly important, and I really look forward to showing how we can work with the local horizon compass, the local space compass. Let me show you. I'll do this for my nativity. This is projecting the planets down to the horizon and to their like local azimuths. So here's Jupiter south of east. And so we can create a compass, and this helps us like do temple building or embodiment of a natal chart or any electional chart or whatever it may be, like into Earth. It is such a profound practice of learning to embody the astrological energy, bringing this out of like intellectual space and into the physical practice, a tangible, like tasteable, sentient experience of the heavenly happenings. That to me is the kind of most important function of local space, which was dreamed forth by Michael Erlewine. This is like a book that shows his original articles from the early 1990s, but it's also something that's been used throughout time. Other texts I recommend: Planets and Locality by Steve Cozy, Astrolocality Astrology by Martin Davis. By the way, the local space text, which will be the principal text that we use for this class, it's available as a free ebook, as I think all of Mr. Erlewine's books are amazingly online. Sacred Geography of the Ancient Greeks, originally written in German, an amazing text in this regard. There's a long list of recommended texts, but we'll be using that local space text to assist our journey in the class that I'll be teaching starting this Saturday for Kepler College. I'll put a link in the comments below if you want to check it out. It's a 5-week deep dive 2-hour class every Saturday, beginning this Saturday for 5 Saturdays, and of course everything recorded, but hoping students can make it live because I really want lively class discussion to drive a lot of this. Questions like, you know, in our local space, what kind of altar could we build for Venus? Or what kind of altar could we build for the planet that's the Lord of the 7th house, or whatever, you know? So we can create our chart like here and start to feel it more here in our heart, in our physical body. And I'll be offering a lot of kind of physical practices and constructions like simple sundials and medicine wheel constructions to help us bring the chart here into Earth, into local space. All right. So the local space compass is an amazing gift for that, and also these local space maps. And the local space map here in astro.com is so great because you can really zoom in. So as I trace the Jupiter line, and I love that they show too, you see it says Jupiter opposition here, and the boulder line is off here to the southeast because that's actually the direction Jupiter was at the time of my birth. But again, that line is going to go all the way around the globe and then come back. So that Jupiter line is also in Hawaii, right? And think about it, it's actually gone all the way around the globe and coming back through Hawaii to the place where I live now, which is actually pretty close to the Jupiter line. Now, if I was in Boston, you know, I'd probably want to tune this right into the place where I was born. And actually, you can do that here in this free software, which is amazing. I can come over here and look at where Jupiter is. Because I'm close to it. I live here in Richmond, just on the East Bay, just north of Oakland, very close to San Francisco, where the mouse is. Okay, so I'm pretty dang close to that Jupiter line, but I could go up here to Eureka, and be in the redwoods and connect to Jupiter, you know? So that could be a really cool, like, honeymoon energy for me, right? And again, my partner has her own line, so I want to like work with both of ours, and maybe even work with relationship charts, which is something I'll be showing in this class too. Shasta Lake is here. This is Mount Shasta. It's a very powerful place and has been a powerful place for my own kind of awakening. And so just a reminder that I can go connect to the spiritual energy of Jupiter there. And maybe, you know, if I have, you know, spirit quests I need to do around like relationship ideals and work ideals. Jupiter also the natal ruler of my 10th, like Shasta, Eureka. These are very close places to me where I live now, where I can go and like really be in that energy, right? And Jupiter also moving here, as we saw before, through Hawaii. So this is like, for me, as much as Venus and maybe even more, I can work with Jupiter, who is the dispositor of my 7th house of relationship, and work with these locations, right? Not just these locations, I have, okay, a sticker on this window that points to Hawaii. And actually, you know, my window is not in Boston where these lines are emanating from, but here in California. So the closest city center where we live is El Sobrante, California. So astro.com makes it really easy for me to relocate over there too. You'll see this box that says keep azimuth of birth chart. Don't, okay? Because these geometries should look different. I mean, if I was born in El Sobrante, or even more specifically, I can go to my default location is like the coordinates of my house here in May Road. Oh, that's not working. Let's see. All right. Jupiter was here now just to the west of south. No, that's Neptune. Sorry. Where are you, Jupiter? I've actually got to take the ground away because here in California, in the moment of my birth, Pisces was on the rise and Jupiter in Aries was down below the horizon still, right? And yet, let me look east and I'll zoom in. Yet I can still pull Jupiter up to the horizon. This is the idea of a local horizon or local space compass. So I can see that Jupiter, well, I just quit, but Jupiter, as you could see there, was a little bit north of east. And that's this Jupiter line emerging from where I live now in California. And it's pretty close to my natal Jupiter line. Right now, you see Jupiter actually moving right through Hawaii and moving right through Honolulu, right? So I have that natal north node line and astrocartography moving here. That's not going to change, by the way. Astrocartography lines are just lines of the moment in time, right? So if I relocate this to, let's see, May Road, where I now live, there's that Aries Jupiter down below the horizon in the east, right? Astrocartography lines have not changed. So like there's that north node midheaven line moving here. But the local space lines now show Jupiter crossing that line, right? If you remember, in my natal local space lines, that Jupiter went over here, northwest of Kauai, where we see this Mercury line, okay? And now right through Oahu, pretty close to Maui. The Lilith line still very close, okay? I was living in Seattle at the time, and I might want to go check that out, you know. But importantly, also, right, why am I looking to Jupiter? Because I have Sagittarius as my seventh house in my natal chart, the house of relationships. Sagittarius, of course, associated with Jupiter. Well, in my relocated chart, it's a Pisces rising chart. So Jupiter's a steersman, but the relocated seventh is Virgo, right? So Mercury's the dispositor. And so maybe I want to look at Mercury. Well, Mercury's also heading over towards Hawaii. And, you know, this is not a miracle that my natal Jupiter line goes very close to Hawaii and my relocated Jupiter line goes very close to Hawaii. Why? Because I've moved so close to my natal Jupiter line. So again, if I bring this back to my nativity, and show you my local space lines. There's the Jupiter line, right? Well, since I live so close, I live right here to that Jupiter line and to the Lilith line. The Jupiter and Lilith lines for my relocated chart are going to be pretty similar, okay? And the Mercury line, the relocated Mercury line going to Hawaii, right, also speaks about like that as a place of relationship. All right. So how can I like honor that here? Well, for one, in my own just kind of personal work, I can zoom in, you know, and maybe I could follow that Jupiter line over here to Muir Woods or Mount Tamalpais or towards the coast and go have experiences there. I mean, Anna and I yesterday drove through this line. We went over to Sausalito right here, right? It's close to my sun line. Actually, Alan Watts is one of my favorite spiritual teachers, and this sun line goes very close to a houseboat where he lived, right? So this is my relocated sun line. I can, you know, get much closer and not have to like get in the car and just head down to the park down the hill and connect to this Jupiter line or to this Mercury line or the Sun Uranus line. Now this is El Sobrante city center, but we actually live, oh, where's our place? Here. So a cool thing about this astro.com is I can also center it. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. I can also center it on where I currently reside. I don't know what happened there. Oh, I need to bring this back to El Sobrante. zoom in, and then I can move this to my specific location of our house, which is like here, and center that and mark it as center. Right, that's like right where I'm sitting right now. So there's a Jupiter line, and I have a sticker on my window here, right? That points to this place where Jupiter is on Earth, like in my backyard, in the park down the way, which is Cheese Park, Lemoyne Park here. The Jupiter line comes over this way through Valley View Elementary. I'm like looking at the building it goes to. There's a hill on the horizon heading over to Mount Tamalpais, which I can see, and then to Hawaii, right? And that going all the way around the world to these other locations. So it's a way where, like in my very local space, I can align my energy to that. I have a Western window where I can work with these Western lines. Jupiter's actually moving over here to the northeast, and I can't see that direction, but I can work with this direction, and align my body in that way, right? Connect in. Okay. Um, what else do I want to show? Yeah, so, people often ask about doing relationship charts on maps. And there's a few different ways that we create relationship charts in astrology. We can work with the synastry, we can work with the midpoints. But I really prefer, especially for mapping techniques, what's called the Davidson chart. So this is the moment halfway in between my birth and Anna's birth. And then I've relocated it from the place which a Davidson chart is cast for, halfway between our birthplaces in Boston and Romania. And I relocated it to like where we live now, right? So this is a chart that I can then work with also, like from a local space perspective or an astrocartography perspective. And then interestingly, in our Davidson chart, we have this Venus Neptune conjunction in Sagittarius, and the North Node, actually the South Node nearby in Capricorn. And right at this midpoint between the two is Hawaii, which is this place that's just near and dear to our hearts. So this is kind of right where the seventh house begins, although there's six house planets in this Davidson. So it's a fun confirmation for me, and I'm looking forward to actually working with Anna in my final project for the course that's coming up, to like anchor our relocated Davidson chart into the temple of our home, so we can kind of celebrate this energy of like our relationship, I could say, like in physical form. All right, so I'm going to show you a thing real quick online. If you go over to Kepler College, you can go to their summer courses, or just here on the homepage, because it's starting this Saturday. So short notice, friends. But if you want to learn all about local space astrology in a 5-week deep dive, I hope you will join me. Pretty reasonable, although these times are tough. I understand that, but for as much information as you're going to get in like physical practice and videos that you can refer back to forever, I think that this is going to be a kind of unforgettable course, and that you will be left with powerful tools that you can use for relocation, for remediation, mundane astrology, like political view. I've been sharing a lot of kind of local space on a mundane perspective videos recently. You can find it on my YouTube page, and much, much more. So I hope you'll join us. All right, I'm going to take just a few minutes. I've got a client here in 24 minutes, so I don't have long. But let me stop this, and I'll go look over at the Facebook comments of this live stream. If anybody wants to play, we can have a really quick look at your own nativity. And I can show you like a love line on the map for you. I'm just reading this comment here, a question from Sylvia, who is a great astro mapper herself. Oh, it disappeared, but it said something before it disappeared about can you tell us about eclipse paths and crossings? And yeah, I mean, eclipse activations are huge. I mean, the symbol is pretty clear, light out of shadow, but you don't find that light without going into the shadow. So I mean, I've worked with the power of eclipse paths, just like where the prenatal solar eclipse, for example, was seen on Earth, or lunar eclipses. The solar eclipses show us more of a very kind of discrete path. But the crossings of eclipses, like natal eclipses, and not just prenatal and postnatal eclipse and eclipse families, but also eclipses that activate you, like eclipses that align to sun and such. Um, they will often bring us to these places on Earth. I mean, I see this all the time. All right, cool. April, who was born in April. Let's have a look. Well, April, I need to see your birthplace and birth time as well, if you want to play. And you know that that's releasing us from confidentiality of birth time and place. I see another one here from Sylvia, and I'll go there. Unless April, if you want, share your birth time and place, um, and maybe also message it to me, because the comment stream on these lives is like hard to follow these days. I might be able to see it on my phone a little bit better. I'm running out of time. So, April, let me just check these comments. If I see one here from you, we'll tune into yours if I see your birth time and place. If not, I'll cast Sylvia's chart. Okay, got it. Cohasset, California, 1:08 a.m. Let me just get this going. All right, April. And I wish I could bring you on here for a live discussion. I'm not equipped to do that. Actually, April, hold on. I'm going to send you an invite to this Zoom meeting. So if you want, you can join me live and we'll have a quick live discussion. And if you don't want, just don't show up. All right, let me finish casting this chart. Okay, 4/17/77, 1:08 a.m. Cohasset, California. All right. And I don't see you here on this Zoom meeting, but if you want to join the Zoom, come on over. Let me set you up so you could just dive right in if you want to. Anyway, maybe friends, April will show up here and have a short rap about this. For now, let me share my screen. And April, thank you for being a willing volunteer. So here's your nativity. I just want to triple confirm the chart data that you put online. So 4/17/77, Cohasset, California, 1:08 a.m. Okay, cool. You know, I could bring asteroids in and show a lot more. So here's an image of an astro map when you were born, and this will actually show me right where Cohasset, California is, up in the North State. And so these are the local space lines. And here, this is kind of gets overwhelming to see them all, and astrocartography lines at the same time. Oh, I see you're here. Let me bring you on. Okay, so you're just set up so you can share your camera and your microphone if you want to, April. And then let me see if I can see you. I hear you.
Hi.
Hi. You're welcome to share a camera if you want. All right, so you go ahead.
Says you disabled it, but that's, that's okay.
Well, let me push a button. How do I do that? That will be one way that it can work. Give that a try. Greetings.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for
All right.
letting me join.
My pleasure. Where do you live now?
I'm in the same place. I'm back in my birthplace temporarily. So
Where did you move back from?
I was actually really close to here. I was just in Chico. It's a city that's near Cohasset. Cohasset's in the foothills above Chico.
Got it. Where else have you lived on Earth?
I have lived in near Mount Shasta. I was there for about 2 years going to school, and then I lived in Tucson, Arizona for almost 2 years as well, studying shiatsu there.
Oh,
So
cool. Yeah, so a lot of your places are obviously super close to your birthplace, right? So from like an astrocartographical perspective, things aren't going to change that much. A little bit more so in Tucson, where you moved a little closer to the Saturn at the descendant line that you
okay.
can see moves through El Paso, and then kind of right through the four corners. This is true Black Moon Lilith at the IC. We can look in your nativity, and yeah, I don't know, this might be a stretch, but Saturn is exalted in the sign of Libra, which I have in this Porphyry chart as your ninth. From a whole sign perspective, Virgo and ruler Mercury might like really speak to like higher education. And that's actually super activated like where you live because you were born on this Mercury IC line, and we can see that in your nativity just because Mercury's right here at the IC of your chart. So it's like, and especially in the sign of Taurus, that's just the language of Earth, like the language of the ground speaking through your feet. I mean, Uranus culminating very much an image of the channel and kind of receiving higher information. Are you an artist?
I am an artist, yes. And I work with the ley lines of the earth a lot. That's one of the things that I've been really drawn to do. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I love that with Mercury down there. It really is the voice of the Earth, and opposite Uranus, the ley lines obviously have a very strong kind of energetic component to them, and it's a very, as you well know, like marriage of heaven and earth energy. Actually, in this course I'm teaching, we're going to be looking at some of the old straight tracks as Watkins called them, the ley lines in the UK and here, and looking at a lot of different temples and the way temples have been built for star alignments. But yeah, I mean this T square in your nativity, especially I have this too, the Saturn Uranus square, and Mercury's really in the mix, and it's angular, and it's a long story. But all right, so to get back to this thing, so places that like astrocartographers would send you for, I mean, to speak to the topic of this thing, for like love lines would be traditionally like Venus lines. So Venus is rising in New York. Venus is actually at the IC in Hawaii that I was just speaking about. The Venus midheaven line is here through Eastern Europe, Scandinavia, and Africa. And then the Venus at the setting line is here through like Indonesia and up through China and Japan. Well, not Japan, I guess, Siberia. But I'm very fascinated, like on a personal level, say, oh, well, it's a Cancer descendant, and so the moon is said to be the lady of your seventh house. And traditionally, you really like, even though it's a square, you like that there is a vision between the lady of the seventh and the seventh house cusp. We like that she's conjoined Venus, so the separating from both directions. What's called an inconjunct between Moon and Mars becomes a really interesting story, and that's not something I can take the time to unpack right now. But let's look at some of the moon lines in your chart, right? As the lady of the seventh house, she might have a lot to say about relationship dynamic. And then the other thing is I'll bring in local space lines. It's going to get kind of cluttered, but we see the moon here in the northern hemisphere, at least north of the Tropic of Cancer where you were born. The IC is the direction due north. And so your moon is just kind of east of north when you were born. So when I bring in that local space line, see them all emanating from your birthplace. you'll see that north of east line of the moon. Let me actually tone these down so we're only looking at those lines. And that's this line moving here east of north. And it goes up through like Idaho and up into Canada pretty quickly. Comes back all the way around through the Bay Area, more like Marin, kind of in
Mm,
that like
okay.
Fairfax zone, like San Rafael. Oh, sorry, that's the sun line. So no, the moon line is way up further north. Like I guess this would be more like Eureka space, right? Um,
That's very curious.
yeah, I mean, I wish I could zoom in further and we could see like what's at Chico and Shasta and something. So I encourage you to do that. But let's look more global and see where that moon line reaches. Um, and so it's here through the UK, through Ireland, and pretty close to London, a little bit more on the coast, like Brighton at the coast of England. It's like right through there, very close to Paris.
Yeah, I was actually engaged to someone who was living in the UK a few years ago, so
There you
that's
go.
interesting.
And it'd be fascinating to see like when the engagement happened and when, since we used past tense was, I imagine that didn't turn into is because we're married, but it broke off,
No,
right? So look at
right.
some of the transits, and specifically to your moon into the seventh house cusp at the time of you guys being engaged and then breaking it off. I think you'll find a
Mm.
lot of information there. But yeah, that's cool to see. So you said he was living in, or they were living in the UK. Are they from there?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, so fascinating, right? And so
right.
that's not necessarily like the moon you're going to see usually described as kind of like home, nurturing, mothering, children, and other themes. And again, this is a local space line. We combine that with some of the images of the astrocartography. We don't see too much around. Mars was at the midheaven, and your moon, who lives in the sign of Aries, right, is said to have Mars as a dispositor. So, like this place, you have to take a ferry boat or a cruise ship or something to be at that crossing of Moon and Mars, and that might be a really passionate, like romantic spot for you. But well, let me ask it: are you connected in any way to Paris? Does it call to you? Is like French culture, language, art?
Yeah, I have felt drawn there, and we had plans to visit Paris as we were flying back and forth from here to the UK every 3 months after his visa would expire, and it just never happened. So I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think some of like, some of like the romance paintings of like the Renaissance could really speak, right? And so
Yeah,
I always
yeah.
work with maps too as like bringing places to us, right? So that can be like tuning into music, art, whatever, and also like remediation, right? So if there's lingering like pain or anger around that separation, like you can go through these places to do really deep healing. Um,
Mm.
the moon was directly overhead in Ethiopia when you were born, very close to Addis Ababa. So literally, I would say like dance your ass off to some Ethiopian music, and you can move some of that. Let me see if it was actually more Sudan. So this is
Okay.
where in South Sudan the moon was directly overhead.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
The moon MC
Interesting.
line is also very close to like the Great Pyramid, um, very close to like Heliopolis, and even more so like Karnak and Luxor, right? So very amazing sacred temples live there. And so I'm always interested in this idea of kind of like traveling without moving. So one thing I'm going to do here is just break this down to show me less lines. Actually, let's just look at the moon. So this is where in the moment of your birth, the moon was rising, kind of Halifax, Nova Scotia zone, and down through Brazil. Um,
Mm.
these are places where the moon was culminating at the midheaven. That's where we were just looking, right? And that gets down through Cairo. And these are places where the moon was resting or at the descendant. And I mean, so if you move there, then it's a Libra rising, Aries setting place. We know that because the moon's in Aries, right? So it kind of changes relationship dynamic. Libra rising in general can be a place where you're really connecting into kind of relating themes anyway. But I'm just looking at like your natal chart, seventh house, who is the so-called in the old tongue lord or lady of that sign, and then like speaking to places that that planet was like activated when you were most activated when you were born. So finally, this is the moon at the IC. So like if we cast your chart, a relocated chart for Hawaii, the moon's going to be in the fourth house. The same would be true for like Western Alaska. And then these are the moon local space lines. So yeah, somehow, I mean, Tahiti, like on the map again too. I don't see, but yeah. So these are all kind of places I would really encourage you to connect to. Anyone that really maybe speaks to you, and like through your art, through your gift of painting. I always find that the music and maybe especially the folk music or shamanic music of a place is so powerful. But certainly, also that connection of you and ley lines is amazing. Because that, of course, the geomantic tradition is global, but that term comes from right here. I mean, this is pretty close to the so-called Michael and Mary lines of the UK that are literally run by your moon in local space. So that if I, was able in the moment of your birth to feel the presence of the moon here down below the earth and like held you in that direction, I would literally be holding you like on the Michael and Mary line that goes not just through the UK, as you well know, but all around the globe. So I love that you're connected into those lines. And I mean, I love that you're really born in such a way that Mercury Uranus opposition, and I think also, especially in Leo with the Saturn on the square, that's not meant to feel easy, in its initiations, but it will, I think, offer the opportunities to activate a deep mastery around kind of creative connection to the voice of the earth for like the channeling of higher magic mystery and like importantly like emotional authenticity and expression. Um, so there you go. Thanks for playing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that resonates a lot. I feel really drawn to go back now that I know about those ley lines and visit at some point. So
Right
thank you.
on. Yeah, may it offer a new vibe than from the trips that didn't happen. May it be trips that align even more to the dance of your soul. Nice to
Thank you,
meet
Brett.
you live, April. We've
Nice to
connected
meet you
online like this a few times, so it's cool to see you. Thanks again for volunteering your chart for this dance. That's always a courageous thing, and it's an honor to be able to tune in just even a little bit to your soul song with you. Thank you.
too. Thank you, Brett.
All right, I'll see you in space. And friends, I hope
Right.
you'll check out this local space course. It's going to be amazing. See you then.